Okay, we are going to get started. Our next speaker is George Jackman, and he is going to be, his title of his talk is the Beautiful and the Damned. Must be talking about rivers. Come on up, Jack. George. Jack. So here's, that's down is forward, up is backwards.
Oh, okay.
And that's your laser pointer.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm actually going to try and rush this through before everybody gets back. Because I get a little nervous around crowds. So I titled this The Beautiful and the Dams, because in my opinion, as you can see, that river is just magnificent. And that is the Beaverkill, and just a spectacular river. And this is an old dam that I know Megan would know very well. It's on the Quasaya Creek. And to me, it's a no-brainer. How dams impact our rivers. Uh-oh. How do I? Down arrow. Oh. Okay, so wherever Megan is, I titled it The Beautiful and the Damned because one of my favorite books was The Great Gatsby, and I was a little less impressed by The Beautiful and the Damned. But Anthony Patch was the protagonist in the book. And basically the theme of the book was idleness is a logical response to the meaninglessness of life. So my thought is, what about dams? When they idle a river and create that impoundment, do they make that impoundment less meaningful? So as you can see, this is a reservoir. What happens to it sometimes? And then you put this is another one. This is on the Catskill Creek. It's a magnificent creek. No, I'm sorry, that's the Esopus Creek. Magnificent creek. It flows through the mountains, but you can see over here, it's heavily eutrophic. So, there was a talk from a hydrologist. Rivers are really important for the Earth's hydrologic cycle. And flowing water, when it steps down, moving by gravity, they create their own form and they drain the landscape. I don't know, where am I pointing this to? But rivers are fundamentally different than lakes. Lakes, if you've taken a course in limnology, lakes are born to die. Rivers are dynamic. They drain the watershed. Which way do I point this thing? It's like my remote. It never works. And so lakes are born to die because they fill in. They get filled with sediment. They become eutrophic. Eutrophic is a term that means they age. They senesce. I don't know where I point this thing. Where do I point this thing?
You're pointing the laser.
Oh, no wonder why. I'm pointing the laser. All right. So the difference between a lake and a river is, along the way, there's a series of predictable changes that occur to a river. Rivers drain the landscape. What is the landscape? Or the watershed? It's all the land. All the land is a watershed. But rivers have an important function, and that is to transport material, to transport water, and to function as an aquatic pathway for organisms. And so that's what I was saying is, but what is a river? Most people don't know what a river is. So if we look at it in classification, essentially anything over 15 meters bank to bank would be a river. Anything smaller, we call them a creek or a stream. So, as I said, they form a series of integrated adjustments over the course of their length of flow. And this guy is Luna Leupold. This is Aldo's son. Aldo was famous with the Sand County Almanac. I don't know if anybody's ever read that, but man, There was one about the green eyes of fire. Anytime I read that essay, boy, I cry. It's about when Aldo shot some wolves. And in that book, Aldo talks about the Colorado River running to the Baja. The Colorado River does not run to the Baja anymore. As a matter of fact, I don't even think it makes it to Mexico. So Luna, his son, he's became a geomorphologist and a hydrologist, and he is like the father, the modern father of, or the father of hydrology. But what he said is rivers need to move. They're dynamic. And what I love is this quote: the health of our rivers is the measure of how we live on the land. How we treat our rivers is how we treat our environment. And if you look at this, this is the Seatuck Creek, or the, sorry, I got the Nissaquag. And as you can see, it's sinuous or anfractuous. It needs to move and bend and curve. It finds an area, it needs its oxbows. It needs to communicate with its landscape. And then there's another way to look at a river. It's the river continuum concept. So a river changes. Now picture in the Catskills, you picture a river. I don't know, start with the Beaverkill or the Esopus. It starts exhibiting changes that are characteristic. And they start in these mountain streams. It's steep elevation changes. They get highly oxygenated, and you get high carbon input. You get a lochfinous material. You have branches and leaves. Picture all the Catskill forest, all the leaves. You got this allochthonous input. That's super important. We're a carbon-based life form. That carbon is to be exported to the Hudson River or whatever river. A river generally flows to a large body of water. So if you're in the Hudson River drainage, that carbon that's exported is supposed to reach the ocean. And the reason why our coastal ecosystems are so rich is they're exploiting the carbon. Carbon is the foundation of life. And so then you go further down in elevation, and then it starts to, you don't have the steep drops down the mountains anymore. You start draining through the valleys, and it starts to have a grade, a gentler grade. It has less water. It has more producers inside, internal producers, photosynthetic producers. But up high, you got your shredders, your high, super important for trout in your upper part of the river. And you got your shredders and grazers that rip that carbon, the leaves, into pieces. Here, you're starting to get your own photosynthesis, and you got a greater biodiversity of fish and invertebrates. Then you get down where the river starts to level off. And then you get a warmer water, you got less oxygen, and then you have internal production. So you generate autochthonous carbon. And the plankton, the organic matter from the floodplains helps supercharge those food webs. But when you add a dam, it's like creating an ecological reset point. You have to start over, because a lot of that sediment mineral from worn down rock is stopped. It gets deposited in the impoundment. If anybody has a 401k, it's a really good idea to borrow on that all the time, right? No. If you want to ever retire, well, nobody can retire anymore, so just keep working. But that's another, we'll save that for later. But when you borrow on your 401k, what happens is the snowball doesn't get a chance to roll downhill very well. It will be a smaller snowball by the time it hits the ground. And the hyporheic zone, it's the silent river. Now, I wish there wasn't a hydrologist in this room because I could talk a lot more and I could probably say lots of things about rivers that people wouldn't understand, but he could call me out. So I got to be really careful. The Titanic hit an iceberg, right? The iceberg it saw. No, it didn't hit the iceberg it saw. It hit the iceberg it didn't see that was underwater. So this image, to me, is the hyporheic zone below the river. So this is the all right. This is the visible river, and this is the unseen river. So here's a cross section of the hyporheic zone. Super important for invertebrates, juvenile fishes, gas exchange, nitrogen. There's a lot of geochemical recycling. And it's a dynamic mixing zone. That hyporheic zone supports the Seine River. And so and it's also important for maintaining the temperature balance and the osmotic balance, the minerals and salts, and it creates unique habitats. So if you look at like ammocetes of lamprey, they burrow into the substrates, and many times they're in the hyporheic zone. And the hyporheic zone might extend past the actual stream. So it influences the nature of the stream, the chemistry of the stream, but most importantly, within a hyporheic zone, or on the edge of a stream, or between the river, the seen river, and the unseen river, you have an ecotone. In biology or ecology, an ecotone is a transitional area. Just like the riparian corridor, the hyporheic zone, and that there's an ecotone between there. And what makes them special is the ecotone has a higher biodiversity than either one of the realms, whether it's the river or the hyporheic zone. That interface is really important. Well, the hyporheic zone also functions as its own ecotone. However, when you add a dam, according to Sawyer et al. 2009, you also alter the hydrologic, the thermal, geochemical, and the faunal dynamics of a river. That's really important because we only understand what we see. Back to. So here's another point I want to. Dams. Somebody said they're going to go visit a waterfall here on Long Island. I didn't know we had bedrock, exposed bedrock ledges. Dams are not waterfalls. As you can see, one of our most important diadromous fishes in our streams, over 25% of our biomass should be American eels. American eels can easily climb up this, easily. If you ever see them, a juvenile eel, those little glass elvers, the glass eels that would become elvers, they're like Alex Honnold. And if anybody knows Alex Honnold, he's the guy who climbs without ropes. But picture Alex Honnold without arms. They do it without ropes and arms. So I watched that movie of Free Solo with Alex Honnold. I'm like, well, you should look at eels and you'd be really impressed. Because in the Hudson Valley, there's a gorge, the Posting Kill Gorge, 285 feet. There's an impoundment over there. It's filled with eels. Those eels climb a 285-foot waterfall. But I tell you what, they have a heck of a time getting over that. It's a sudden you see, they can't generate a rheotaxis to move up there. Our diadromous fish can't leap. Salmo salar, the Atlantic salmon, is a leaper. Our river herring, our shad, our eels, they're not leapers. That is a problem. So what happens when you have a dam? Well, first of all, it violently changes, and I say violently because it's creating a wall. And it causes enhanced solar radiation, and it stops the water, and you change from a riverine ecosystem, you go from a lotic ecosystem to a lentic ecosystem. And so you still that water, rivers move, they transport, they move, they're dynamic. A pond, and the difference between a lake and a pond is in a pond, light hits the bottom. If it doesn't hit the bottom, it's a lake. And so this sediment starts to build up. Over time, that that basin starts to fill in. And then you got problems down here, but you get a lot of solar radiation. Remember I said about all that carbon? That's super important. And then a lot of the critters, and I say by evolutionary fiat, they deserve their certain amount of water. They've evolved for thousands, if not millions of years to certain hydrologic cycles. And here you interrupt that. It's no small wonder many of our amphibians and sensitive plants are fading away. So, but what does a dam do? Dams, you see, before there was a Con Ed, a dam's major function is to raise the water level. You create a higher potential energy and you capture the kinetic energy as it falls. So essentially a dam raises the water level. But in the process, this is a clear flowing stream. That's the Pomagat Kill. It's magnificent, clear as day. I saw trout in there. This is a downstream of a dam. It becomes stained, turbid, and much warmer. There's a significant difference in temperature. Here's another problem that you see in dam. Because it stills the water, it creates eutrophication. And then it stops the sediment. So what you get is downstream scour. Oh boy, I'm only 10, so I got a long way to go. So anyway, this horrifying image is to me, what a dam does to a river. They damage it. So we went through that. It fragments the habitat. What's so bad about that? Well, fragmented habitats are far less stable. And it causes genetic isolation. Now, if you're a freshwater fish trapped between two dams, you don't have emigration or immigration of alleles or genetic material. And then you alter your chemical and thermal regimes. You heat it up, you change your dissolved oxygen. And then you stratify that water column. Cold water is denser, warm water is lighter. So you create the dense water settles to the bottom, you have less mixing. And then you add nutrients are endemic to human populations. Phosphorus or phosphates are limiting in fresh water. You add a little bit of phosphate, it's like putting manure on a field, and then add nitrogen. And then you increase their turbidity. And here's the problem. Warm water species are more suitable to the impoundments. And then what you see in these impoundments is temperature being inversely proportional to the oxygen levels. And then the polar covalent bond, water is an amazing molecule. It becomes slightly electronegative. Dissolved oxygen weakly binds to that. So you would think that cooler water, the warm water species can survive, but the salmonids, the trout and the salmon, need a much better quality of water. So because of the biological oxygen demand, the stratification, and the photosynthesis, it all sinks to the bottom, and then you get a dead zone in the bottom. So you create eutrophication. This is what we're seeing in a lot of our ponds. You go to any duck pond on Long Island, they're green. Eutrophication means it's just senescing. It's getting old. And so you add nitrogen and phosphorus, you create these bloom and bust cycles. And then you get excessive, like in the dam that breached behind it, you have excessive growth of invasives, bloom and bust. And you would think with a lot of aeration with the SAVs, it would create oxygen. Not necessarily. It can absorb a lot of oxygen out of the water. So like I said, those nutrients aggravate everything. So dams, these impoundments, these are different impoundments that I took pictures of. And one of the worst things is the neurotoxins released from these cyanobacteria are pretty lethal. They're pathogens. You could get sick, and dogs can die just by even licking their coat. And when you see this stuff, the state wants you to report it. You can see it looks like stains. Dams create the conditions for that. And so, but here's something else that we're finding out. Hydropower is clean and green. Well, not really. The dams release a lot of greenhouse gases, methane and carbon dioxide. To make this fast, it's just like when you digest vegetable matter. Same thing happens. Methane gas is 50 to 80 times more potent of a greenhouse gas. Dams are dangerous. This is the Harrisburg Dam in that kid is fishing right there, right below that boil. This scares me. These are all dams I've been next to. 29 people died on that dam. 21 people in the Wilmington Dam in Chicago, south of Chicago, on the Illinois River. Eddyville Dam, 2 kayakers were rescued. And in the Bronx River, 2 teens died jumping off that dam in 2010. There's a hydraulic recirculation below the dams that are super dangerous. And your swimming ability will not help you. One of the most counterintuitive things, if you have a vest on, you have to either try to get to the bank and get thrashed in the way, or release that vest and swim to the bottom to get out of that hydraulic recirculation. Who has the presence of mind? So they're really dangerous. So I bring up the public trust doctrine. It started with Roman and time of Justinian and English common law with the Magna Carta, but it's now the foundation of environmental law. The trust resources don't belong to any individual, they belong to the public. Who's the public? I am a public landowner. And those resources are held in trust for me, my family, and all you guys. As we say, I live in Queens, we use guys. And the public trust doctrine includes things that have value. And navigable rivers are trust resources. And the trustees, meaning the state, has a responsibility to protect them. Here's the problem with dams. There's over 5,000 registered dams in New York State alone, over 90,000. That is grossly underestimated because that's dams over 5 feet that are registered. There are so many that are called ghost dams. But here's another part about rivers coming up. Sedimentation. This is the Hudson River. I took this from the Bear Mountain Bridge. You can see the sediment. I took that because it's what rivers do. They move sediment. And rivers transport sediment, dams still the water. In a gradation, it drops that sediment. The finest sediment accumulates behind the dam, and toxins and metals attach themselves because of the chemistry and the surface area of those fines. If there are sediments and you want to remove a dam, you got to mitigate them. That greatly affects the cost. And the problem is there's no clear path. And there's no pathway to understand what you're up against. Working. This time it's not me. Shucks. And so here's the other thing. People talk about fishways. And I was having a conversation before. Ask the fish what they want. So you throw them in an impoundment filled with warm water predators. They don't stand a chance. From egg to juvenile, this is what they're facing. An unnatural predation suite. So what I say is, if I said, who wants to go climb the George Washington Bridge? Who could do it? I'd probably get some of the young guys and young gals, maybe 10% at best. That's what we're asking fish to do with a fishway, to do something unnatural. But one of the problems with fishway is nobody ever looks at downstream mortality. I don't know of any studies. So you take an alewife and you dump them 15 feet into super oxygenated water, they could get barrel trauma. And then you throw them in if the juveniles escape. But people say, will that dam, when you remove a dam, will it be a mud pit? This was right after a dam breached. And then we went in there to plant trees. I'll tell you what, nature knows how to sculpt the landscape. That was the first time that floodplain's been in communication with the river in several hundred years. Unfortunately, freshwater organisms are now the most imperiled organisms, group of taxa on the planet. Whether it's mussels and whether it's diadromous species, they're all declining. The background extinction rate for freshwater organisms is 900 times greater than the background extinction rate. It is actually now higher than the rainforest species. Then I hear, oh, damn, that's historic. Well, this was a dam we were looking at, was historic, but there's always creative solutions. Nothing is more historic. Here's the Town Brook in Plymouth, Massachusetts. They removed 6 dams on this river. They were all historic. But what they said is the fish are historic, the river's historic, the Native Americans are historic. This was a dam we removed. And that's the problem, and there is a solution. That's what it looks like. In this situation, 85 years, that dam blocked river herring. 4 days after it was removed, alewife showed up. That image is from them showing up to return in that. So, and all right, I'm just going to flip right through it because I'm out of time. I often say environmental justice is intersectional with ecological justice because often impoverished people were situated in suboptimal conditions. This community is downstream of a high dam and upstream of another one. They experience constant flooding. So I'm going to go through it. You can read it, and I'm done. And beaver dams are my favorite.
Thanks, George. We don't have time for questions.
Thank God.